So, I recently watched the Critical Drinkers review of the new Disney series Ahsoka. I really like the Critical Drinkers channel and I think his reviews are often on point. But I have to say, in this situation, he got it dead wrong. Sure, most of Disney Star Wars is as disappointing as the later half of Bill Cosby's career. But Ahsoka was actually really good. It had some truly moving scenes, some great action, some beautiful worlds, great characters. It was far better than the shit show that was Obi-Wan Kenobi. And although it wasn't perfect, it is definitely a step in the right direction. But before I point out where the Critical Drinker was wrong, let's begin by pointing out what they actually got right. By the way, this is Blarney on the telly. Subscribe or you'll miss out. So, the Critical Drinker got some things very right about Ahsoka. First thing they got right. What the fuck is going on with lightsabers? They used to be able to cut through doors. Now you get stabbed with one and you just need a few stitches. The second thing the Critical Drinker got right. The whole idea that all the main characters were on a mission to find some hidden galaxy and then Ahsoka just manages to find some whales that are going to that galaxy was a bit of a stretch. But it was all about Ahsoka learning to stop controlling things and trusting in the Force. So it was okay for me and it kind of made sense. And the final thing that the Critical Drinker got right was that Sabine was quite a cold character and didn't express much emotion. He was right, and maybe it was poor acting, but also Sabine's character has been through a lot of bad stuff in Rebels and there's a lot of room for this character to grow, so let's see how it will turn out. So now let's get to the really long list of stuff that the Critical Drinker was really fucking wrong about. So firstly, the Critical Drinker thought that Ezra was pathetic and boring. Ezra is a great character from Rebels and he was perfectly portrayed in this show. He was never a commanding character in Rebels. He was always a boy becoming a man, at times a comical and easygoing character. So I think he was brought into live action perfectly and his character has so much room to grow. The Critical Drinker also asked what witches were doing in Star Wars, and I kind of get why he would think that is strange, but witches have been in Star Wars for a long time. The witches of Dathomir were a huge part of the brilliant Clone Wars TV show, and Star Wars is based in a world where anything can happen. So it's not that surprising to see anything happen in Star Wars really when it's related to mystical things or magical type of things. So the Critical Drinker was wrong to question what they were doing in this show. The Critical Drinker was also wrong that you have to watch all the previous Star Wars material to enjoy or understand this show. That is just a ridiculous statement. The original Star Wars movies threw us straight into the middle of a story with no explanation. The first Star Wars movie was called Episode 4 for fuck's sake. And in this day and age, do we really need shows to jog our memory about everything that has happened so far when we can just jump onto YouTube and watch a quick recap video? It definitely helps to have met these characters in the past, but even if you haven't, this show is still entertaining. Then the Critical Drinker insulted the parts of Ahsoka that had Anakin in it. He suggested that this was just a way to bring a familiar face into the show. But anyone who has followed the Clone Wars and Rebels will know how important Anakin's story is to Ahsoka. You could not have a story about Ahsoka where Anakin isn't a big part. Anakin and Ahsoka were literally like father and daughter for all of the Clone Wars. And then they tragically met in Rebels when Anakin had turned into Vader. All the moments with Anakin were deep and touching, so I don't know what the Critical Drinker was shiting on about here. And then the Critical Drinker suggested that Ahsoka's character didn't develop throughout the series. Wrong. Ahsoka went through a giant spiritual awakening. At the start of the show, she is lost. She is controlled by fear, and she doesn't trust in the Force, which leads her to refuse to train Sabine and creates a distant relationship with her. Once Ahsoka nearly dies and meets Anakin in the place in between worlds, she learns to let go of fear, embrace life, and to embrace the light side of the Force again. Ahsoka learns that her master Anakin was a good person that eventually managed to beat the dark side within them. She learns to remember the good person that Anakin was, and it is from learning to trust the Force again that she finds the whales that lead her to Sabine and Ezra. She isn't 100% sure that the whales are leading them to the right place, but she gives up control and she lets the Force lead her. Much like Luke let the Force guide him when he was flying the X-Wing in the original Star Wars. And okay, I agree with the critical drinker's point that everyone should have been a bit more pissed off with Sabine when she gave Thrawn away back home. But again, it does come down to Ahsoka letting go of control and seeing herself in Sabine. But I do agree that Sabine has probably killed a lot of people doing that, so it is a bit fucked up. But the critical drinker pissed me off most when he talked about the poor characters in the show. Ahsoka is a series that added so many great new characters, and it has added to the story of so many great legacy characters. Thrawn, for example, is an interesting and imposing bad guy. Sure, he makes some silly decisions, but so is every bad guy in Star Wars. The Emperor and Vader were forever making silly mistakes, but Thrawn is threatening because he is so cold and calculated and he always has a plan. And although his plan is drawn out, he does manage to achieve his objective by leaving all Force sensitives trapped in this new galaxy, or at least trapped as far as he knows. Obviously, Ezra snuck on his ship, but he thinks that he's been successful in his mission. And Sabine and Ezra aren't perfect characters, I know, but they have a lot of room for growth. Likewise, Baylan and his apprentice have a lot of room to grow and could be very interesting in the future. But most importantly, Ahsoka is a great character, and I don't know why the critical drinker is so hard on Ahsoka as a character. She is literally the female character that the critical drinker has been saying Disney need to have in their shows and that they're scared to put in their shows. She has a deep backstory. She is commanding and powerful, but she is flawed at the same time. She is always making mistakes, always looking for guidance, and always evolving and growing. She isn't the Mary Sue invincible character that the critical drinker is always harping on about. And it is sad that he doesn't see that this is the great female character that we've been looking for. And I don't agree either that her action scenes were slow or boring. I thought all the action scenes with Ahsoka were good. And then another major issue that I have with the critical drinker's review of Ahsoka was where he really tore into Dave Filoni, who is the writer of Ahsoka, and he suggested that Dave Filoni was just a waste and wasn't any good for Star Wars. Now, Dave Filoni wrote The Clone Wars and he wrote Rebels too. The critical drinker basically said that everything Dave Filoni does is rubbish and talked about him like he is one of these crappy corporate writers. But Dave Filoni actually is, in my opinion, the best thing to happen to Star Wars since George Lucas. He actually writes Star Wars stories like a fan, and I would have loved him to have made the Disney Star Wars trilogy. He brings the magic back to Star Wars, and with him, I think Star Wars is safe. I don't think Ahsoka has saved Star Wars, but I think it is a big step in the right direction. And I hope it can fill in some of the stories around the Disney trilogy and possibly make that shit show not seem so bad. I remember how bad the prequel trilogy was, and how the Clone Wars made it so much better by filling in the gaps of the story. Maybe that can still happen for the new trilogy. As for the critical drinker, if he ever sees this, I'm sure he will say that I'm an idiot that laps up whatever Disney throws at me. And my answer to that is fuck you. I still love your channel, but I don't have to lap up everything you hand to me either. But I'll tell you, there is something that the critical drinker and I both agree on, and that is how shit the new Marvels was. Click on the video on screen to see more about that. That's all I've got for you today. Go away now.